"Our son has passed away. Aren't you going back to your parents' home? We'll be using this house from now on." Suddenly, my beloved husband was gone. Just after the funeral, it was my husband's parents who came to visit me, overwhelmed by sorrow. Though we didn't live together for a very long time, this house holds various memories of my husband. Why do I have to leave this house? But before I could even wipe my tears, my mother-in-law coldly informed me of this. "My name is Cheryl, and I work as an office clerk at a real estate company. I met my dear husband, Matthew, at the real estate company where I work. He was the brother of my colleague, and the two were very close. Since their workplace was nearby, he often visited. As a fellow office clerk, I also became close to that colleague who would later become my brother-in-law. That connection led him to introduce me to his real brother. As time passed, I started spending more time with them, such as having lunch together. Matthew and I got along well, and he made a good impression, but I didn't have romantic feelings at first. I thought he felt the same way until one day when our relationship changed. It was supposed to be a meetup at a restaurant reserved by my colleague, but he suddenly had urgent business and couldn't come. Not wanting to waste the reservation, I ended up spending time alone with Matthew for the first time. I later found out that this day had been planned by the brothers, with my future brother-in-law arranging for us to be alone at the request of his brother. As we enjoyed delicious food, our conversation flowed, and we shared our backgrounds and values, eventually realizing we had built a close relationship. Getting to know him more, I was drawn to his comforting smile. That day marked the beginning of a change in our relationship. And it didn't take long before we got married. It wouldn't have been possible without my brother-in-law's help, and I can't thank him enough for that. Then came the day I first met my parents-in-law. Filled with anxiety, they welcomed me very warmly. Their considerate conversation eased my nerves. "Thank you for coming. I'm so happy. I was looking forward to meeting you, Cheryl. I've prepared a lot of food so that today will be a wonderful day." As she said this, my mother-in-law kindly took care of me. My parents-in-law, like their eldest son, my husband, had a strong sense of independence and were very approachable. I was relieved and filled with gratitude for the enjoyable time spent at their home. Even after several meetings, my parents-in-law watched over our happiness, maintaining a good distance without putting pressure on us about marriage or children. Eventually, the topic of living together at their home came up, but we had plans to build our own house. Actually, my grandfather plans to leave his house to us. When I explained this, my parents-in-law listened seriously and nodded. To my grandfather, I was his only grandchild, and he adored me dearly, ultimately leaving me a beautifully renovated house and land. It seemed as if my grandfather had been waiting to finish the inheritance procedures before he passed away. The land soon underwent redevelopment, and because of its excellent location, the land value skyrocketed. However, with my years of experience in the real estate industry, I know that it's better to boldly sell it and build our ideal home rather than living there ourselves. Although I am grateful for my grandfather's love, I had heard that I was free to live in or sell the inherited house, so we were considering selling it. After we got married, we moved into that house. However, it was far from my workplace, and despite its excellent location, it was difficult to live there permanently. As we proceeded with considering the sale, an unexpected change occurred in our lives. My husband's company, where he works in sales, assigned him a transfer. The company is a large corporation with many branches nationwide. My husband was chosen because there was no other suitable candidate, and there was no option to decline. I'll definitely come back during the holidays. Also, to make sure you don't feel lonely, my parents will come to visit. If it's not too much trouble, could you take them out? Your parents are really nice people, so it would be fun to go out with them. However, the sale of the house might take a bit longer. Because of my job, my husband had to go on a solo assignment, and we had to cope with this sudden change. It was a sudden transfer, but I endured the loneliness of living alone, eagerly awaiting the day when I could live with my husband again. Just as my husband said, my parents-in-law often visited us on holidays. My mother-in-law, who had endured loneliness herself while caring for young children during her husband's business trips, especially understood my feelings of solitude. Memories with family can be made in any form. Let's go out together. If we enjoy shopping, it will brighten your spirits. Come on, Cheryl, let's go. We have a 2-year-old daughter, and it's delightful to see her enjoy our outings. Thanks to my mother-in-law's help, I've been able to spend my holidays busy instead of feeling lonely. However, concerns started to grow over time. On my days off, I almost always receive an invitation from my mother-in-law to go out. While that itself wasn't a problem, after a month, her invitations began to feel a bit forceful, ignoring my fatigue and our household circumstances. When I mentioned, I'd like to rest this week, my mother-in-law made a displeased face, as if I were complaining. But it's fun to go out together, isn't it? You don't dislike going out with me, do you? No, it's not that. But I thought you might be tired since you invite me every week. My mother-in-law looked sad. Even when I hurried to clear up the misunderstanding, she wouldn't listen at all. However, one day, she suddenly showed a bright smile, behaving as if she had forgotten all about our earlier conversation. I was confused but gladdened by it. In my mind, doubts about my mother-in-law's behavior grew stronger each day. The places she insisted on visiting were always shops with high expenses. The shopping at branded stores and meals at upscale restaurants continued, and I was always the one paying. Whenever it came to paying, my mother-in-law would always leave the store first. She never thanked me for the payments, nor did she ever offer to pay later. Of course, we have a house and sufficient salary, so I'm not worried about money. However, my husband and I have always been mindful of saving, and I didn't feel good about my mother-in-law's spending. When both of my parents-in-law were together, the situation was the same, if not worse. My father-in-law's presence only increased my financial burden. It was clear that this issue needed to be resolved, but discussing it with my husband was quite difficult. He had promised to definitely return during the holidays, but his new workplace was very busy, and he couldn't come home as often as he wanted. During a video call with my husband, his dark circles and gaunt face caught my attention. It was clear that he was exhausted from work. Feeling sorry to bring up the issue with my mother-in-law, I ended up pretending to be stronger than I felt. Your mother has been very kind to me. Matthew, take care of your health too. I'm fine, so don't worry. While hiding the situation from my husband, I continued to be unable to refuse the spending with my parents-in-law. However, their demands escalated, and when I finally said, I can't go out today, they made this suggestion. Why don't you lend us some money instead? What? I have to pay. Just a little bit, really just a bit. I've already booked the restaurant, but I'm going with a friend instead. Can you cover the part we're short? Unable to refuse, I reluctantly agreed and resigned myself to paying. However, I never showed this attitude to my husband. When I hinted to my mother-in-law, "Why don't you discuss it with Matthew?" she surprisingly responded, "It's embarrassing to talk to Matthew about such things." Thinking it shameful to ask her eldest son, She deemed it natural to rely on her daughter-in-law. I had given up on my mother-in-law's attitude, and being asked for money had become a routine matter. At least if I gave her some money as allowance, she would stop forcibly taking me out. I was aware that the problem was growing. However, interactions with my mother-in-law became more complicated, and I was mentally exhausted. Her behavior became increasingly incomprehensible and bizarre each day. She would arrive unannounced, and it felt like she was invading our privacy as she looked around the house, as if searching for valuable things. "Is this artwork something your grandfather left, Cheryl? It's lovely. With such fine antiques, you must be quite wealthy." Antique furniture selected by my grandfather remained in the house. My mother-in-law was captivated by them, visiting frequently to gaze at them obsessively and treating them as if they were her own. But this is our home, my husband's and mine. I finally decided to confide in my husband about my mother-in-law's behavior. I didn't know how he would react, but having his support to find a solution would be immensely comforting. My mother-in-law's actions were not pleasant, and regardless of being parents-in-law, intrusion into our private lives should not be tolerated. Around the same time, the duration of my husband's solo assignment was finalized. Just a little more patience until he returned. I hoped that once my husband returned, the financial demands from my parents-in-law would cease. A faint hope was rising in my heart. As my husband was working hard every day, I too had to endure just a little longer. I was looking forward to reuniting with him, but then a sudden incident occurred. What? Matthew collapsed and was taken to the hospital. My mind went blank. The call came from a colleague at my husband's place of assignment, and I rushed to the hospital immediately. Overwork had caused him to suddenly have a heart attack. Matthew was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. My always healthy and kind husband passed away suddenly from the attack and left us. Unable to accept this reality, I faced the funeral. The sense of loss was overwhelming, and I hardly remember anything. My brother-in-law rushed to help and took care of many arrangements on my behalf. "I'm sorry you just lost your brother too, and yet you're helping me so much." "It's my brother's funeral. Of course I'd help. Besides, are the land procedures okay? Is everything ready at home?" As we cleaned up after the funeral, I nodded and replied, "It's okay, everything is in order." A few days after my husband's funeral, my parents-in-law came to our house. However, it was clear they were not there to offer condolences. "Our son has suddenly passed away, and it's sad, but we're here for you. Don't worry." My mother-in-law was inexplicably smiling. Even more shockingly, she had arranged for a large truck, which was already loaded with furniture and belongings from her home. I was so surprised and confused at the moment that I couldn't say anything. This was clearly a move. Without any consultation, it seemed my parents-in-law intended to move into our house. Why would they take such an action? However, the reason became clear immediately. "Are you after our land?" In the midst of the confusion, a suspicion I had long harbored slipped out. My mother-in-law smirked coldly. "The land value has gone up considerably. I've had my eye on this house for a long time. In fact, we approved your marriage to my son because of this inheritance." Crushed by despair, I was at a loss for words. "So, you mean to say that you want to live with me here?" "What nonsense are you talking about?" my mother-in-law responded angrily, unable to hide her fury. Matthew's death was unexpected. In spite of that, my mother-in-law had been plotting to take over this house. My parents-in-law were trying to drive me out and claim this land as their own. and they had assumed I would leave the house voluntarily. Since our son has passed, aren't you going back to your parents' home? We will be using this house now. My mother-in-law smirked with a sinister smile. She gradually cornered my daughter and me towards the front door. Outside, it was pouring rain. In this cold, we wouldn't be able to endure being outside. Though I might manage, the idea of her doing such a cruel thing even to her own granddaughter terrified me. Still, I pointed out her mistake. Actually, the house has already been sold. It was difficult to restrain my laughter seeing the look on my mother-in-law's face, and a slight smile escaped me. My mother-in-law, shocked, exclaimed, "What?" At that moment, a truck from a completely different moving company arrived in front of the house. "Sorry, we've come for a delivery to this address." Due to the other moving company's truck stopping, muscular workers descended and approached us to verify the situation. Workers from the moving company hired by my mother-in-law also got out, and it was clear they sensed the confusion caused by the unexpected arrival of another truck. I demanded an explanation from my parents-in-law about what was happening, but both were too shaken to provide a coherent answer. Arguing in this situation wouldn't solve anything. Seeing them in such a state, I began to regain some composure. Then I gave clear instructions to move the truck. This house has already found a new owner, and the sale has been completed. The new residents are planning to move in, so you can't just put your things into someone else's house, can you? Amidst the movers' astonishment, a luxury car arrived. Out stepped a wealthy-looking couple with their children. In fact, I no longer owned this land. They were the new owners. My parents-in-law were even more disturbed, unable to comprehend what was happening. "Please move the truck quickly. The new residents' movers can't start their work." I managed to have the truck arranged by my mother-in-law moved, allowing the movers to begin their work and start bringing in the new furniture. My parents-in-law couldn't accept the situation and kept pressing me at the front door. During this time, the new homeowners, having had their family wait in the car, came over to confront the chaos. "Who are you exactly? This is the house we purchased. Please have the truck removed immediately." Caught off guard by the unexpected arrival of my parents-in-law, I scrambled to calm them. However, my parents-in-law didn't back down. They pushed past us and entered the house. Naturally, the interior was completely different, and none of the furniture we had used was left. My mother-in-law was shocked by the drastic changes and started causing a scene loudly. "What has happened here?" "The house is empty. My beloved antique furniture and lighting are gone. They were my favorites." "What is going on?" she yelled in confusion and rage. Then, the family planning to move in shouted, "We will call the police." Visibly shaken, my father-in-law decided to leave with my mother-in-law quickly. After giving them some space, my mother-in-law, though initially agitated, began to calm down and quieted. First, I apologized to the incoming family, providing them with my parents-in-law's names and addresses to prevent further trouble, achieving a temporary resolution. Although I felt overwhelmed by fatigue, I still needed to explain things to my parents-in-law. I returned to them and calmly informed them that the move had already been completed a few days before my husband passed away. I explained that the house had always been scheduled for sale, and everything proceeded as planned. While my husband was on his solo assignment, the plans had been put on hold, but everything resumed with the support of my brother-in-law. Confused by their demands for money and not wanting to worry my husband, I had kept everything to myself until my brother-in-law noticed and offered his help. He had revealed his own difficulties with the family, and had offered his help if needed. Wanting to maintain peace with both my husband and his family, I trusted my brother-in-law's discretion and confided everything to him. He was furious upon hearing about his parents' actions. As my workplace colleague and my husband's brother, he was well aware of his parents' plans. He told me that his brother Matthew was his only family, and by extension, I was a family member too. Our parents either want to live in that house with you or kick you out to make it their own, he said. He described his parents as socially ambitious, vain, and unscrupulous. This is especially true for my mother-in-law, who, despite portraying herself as an ideal lady in public, is actually self-centered and indifferent to others at her core. The family insights from my brother-in-law carried a significant weight, revealing the true nature of my mother-in-law, which my husband never knew because she was always pretending in front of her eldest son. Given this situation, my brother-in-law advised me to sell the land early to prevent it from falling into their hands. I agreed with his suggestion and decided to proceed with the sale. As much as I cherished the estate left by my grandfather, I didn't want it to become a source of discord between me and my husband. Rather, because it was so important, I didn't want to leave any problems unresolved. Of course, this decision wasn't made impulsively. My husband and I had discussed it beforehand, and he had agreed. Through this process, my husband came to understand the full extent of his parents' actions. I originally wanted to keep it a secret, but I couldn't decide to sell on my own. Still, he understood the feelings I couldn't express and was clearly angry about his parents' actions. I'm sorry I didn't know. If you think this is best, let's quickly sell it before any problems arise. I'm really sorry it had to come to this, considering it was an important house inherited from your grandfather. It's okay. If it leads to such trouble, I'm sure my grandfather would also agree to sell. I decided to sell the land to protect our future as a couple, rather than maintain relations with my parents-in-law. My brother-in-law, who is knowledgeable in real estate, helped us by finding the right buyers. My role was to quickly find a new place to move, complete the move, and act naturally so as not to alert my parents-in-law. The house showed signs of use as we had lived in it, but it was almost like new, and we priced it accordingly. A buyer was found quickly, and the sale went smoothly. The family that arrived earlier are the new owners. Originally, I was supposed to wait for Matthew's return to our new home. It's regrettable that he approved of and was pleased with the sale, but couldn't be here to see it through. The movers were efficiently progressing with their work. My parents-in-law, having been ousted, could only stand by dumbfounded, but such a situation could not continue. The moving company my parents-in-law had hired appeared, clearly confused and seeking an explanation. For the movers, it must have been baffling to encounter an unexpected booking. I never imagined such a thing would happen. You are breaching the contract, the movers pressed my in-laws, but they were at a loss for words and couldn't explain themselves properly. In the end, the household goods had to be taken back, resulting in unexpectedly high additional fees. Finally understanding the full situation, my mother-in-law reached out to me with trembling hands. This is the home of our son's wife, and so it should be our home too, right? Isn't this situation odd? My mother-in-law desperately tried to justify herself and convince me, but I ignored her pleas and left with only my personal belongings. The land already belonged to the new family, and it was no longer mine to claim. My husband's memorial service was completed without further incident. I crossed paths with my parents-in-law, and though they tried to speak, they ended up leaving in haste without saying anything. I no longer felt obliged to maintain a connection with them, and our conversations dwindled. Now, I am living peaceful days as if nothing had happened. I was supposed to start a new life with my husband in a new home, but with his loss, that dream vanished. Although selling the house left me with substantial savings, without my husband, I have no desire to build a new house. I returned to work, reminiscing about the days spent with my husband and trying to rediscover myself to stay positive. On the other hand, my parents-in-law, particularly my mother-in-law, seemed increasingly dissatisfied. I avoided any interaction with them and did not share my new address. The lack of contact with me seemed to amplify her dissatisfaction. Because she always put on airs in front of Matthew and couldn't go to her estranged younger son, she didn't even know where I was. The stress accumulated, and eventually, my mother-in-law lost her mental balance. One night, she scattered gasoline around the vicinity of our former home and attempted arson. Fortunately, a passing neighbor noticed her unusual behavior and immediately stopped her, preventing the situation from escalating. When the police arrived at the scene, they found evidence that she was about to start a fire, including a lighter and old newspapers, leading to her arrest for attempted arson. The new owners of the house, who had encountered her on their moving day, were extremely angry when they learned she was the perpetrator and informed me they were considering legal action. I repeatedly apologized for her horrific actions, but there was nothing I could do about her crime. Ultimately, my mother-in-law's obsessive behavior led to her arrest, and I managed to apologize to the new family, promising to ensure such an incident never happened again. My mother-in-law, having grown up in a privileged environment, believed she could have anything she desired. Unable to cope with the reality that she couldn't have the desired house, her jealousy manifested in a twisted way, ultimately leading her to commit a crime and go to prison. Her arrest led my father-in-law to decide he could no longer endure their constant arguments, prompting him to divorce her and move forward with his life. Even after serving her sentence, my mother-in-law would have no home to return to, all as a result of her actions. Meanwhile, feeling lonely after losing his brother, my brother-in-law continued to encourage me, saying, "Because I have a sister-in-law, I can get through this." Although my relationship with my parents-in-law was severed, I hadn't lost all my family. I pledged to spend peaceful days with my daughter, believing that my husband was watching over us from heaven.
I'm heading out now. I made dinner and put it in the fridge so you can heat it up and eat it, okay? After an early dinner in the evening, I wrapped up the other portion to save for later. This was my husband Victor's dinner. I could just leave the meal out, but that somehow feels lonely. That's why I make it a practice to prepare meals in advance and leave a note when I have night shifts. My name is Kate Smith. I work at a major fast food chain restaurant, doing shift work including night shifts. Shift work can be taxing on the body, but I find fulfillment in my job. On nights when I work, I use more energy than on other days. Therefore, it's necessary that I have a solid meal in the evening to store up energy. Victor works a set schedule from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. Because our work schedules are different, we seldom have meals together. Sometimes we do eat together, but we mostly eat separately. We don't see each other often, and opportunities for dates are limited. However, we understand each other's work commitments, and the motivation to work hard now to travel to various places in the future keeps us going. When we need to talk or share something, we make time even if it's brief to communicate directly. When we can't speak face to face, I sometimes write notes and leave them on the table in the living room. We haven't set any special rules between us, but we both believe in not keeping things bottled up, so we exchange notes. Ever since we started to exchange notes, the loneliness of not speaking has disappeared, and above all, the warmth felt from the words is comforting. Yesterday, a customer I served praised me a lot and said they'd come again. That's great. My work went smoothly as well yesterday, and I came home feeling good. The meat and potatoes you made were really delicious. I appreciate it. Even after 5 years of marriage, Victor never forgets to express his gratitude after meals. Why do you always make sure to express gratitude? I had asked him once before. If you feel something but don't put it into words, it's as if you don't feel it at all, don't you think? I love and respect that mindset of his. That's why I wanted to express my gratitude too. When I come back from night shifts, I usually fall asleep before Victor wakes up, but that day I waited for him to wake up, quietly watching his sleeping face. When Victor woke up, he was surprised to see me there. I love you. Huh, you weren't sleeping? Why? I wanted to tell you, so I stayed awake. Realizing this, Victor gently hugged me. I felt truly happy. Wanting to express gratitude when Victor wakes up was sparked by a moment at work. Does your husband also have night shifts, Mrs. Smith? No, he has a fixed schedule during weekdays. Isn't it lonely with your times so mismatched? Seeing each other a few times a week would be nice, I guess. Really? Is there even a point to being married then? Aren't you lonely? What about the risk of cheating? Haha. I felt irritated by such unfounded assumptions and comments. That won't happen. Don't be so sure about it. What if you suddenly get divorced? I wondered how someone could say such things without considering other people's feelings. But a slight uncertainty started to grow in the corner of my heart. What if I'm overlooking something? If Victor has any complaints, am I not aware of them? I decided to discuss these comments with Victor. Victor hugged me and gently stroked my head as he reassured me. There's nothing I'm unsatisfied with. I'm happy right now. Let's always stay together, okay? Of course. I once again felt the importance of communication. Thinking about how my days with Victor would continue to pass like this was comforting. One evening, when Victor and I were having dinner together after a long time, his phone rang. Who could it be at this late hour? Huh, Mom? Your mother. Maybe something happened. Hurry and answer. Okay. It was unusual for Victor's mother, Susan, to call, and both Victor and I immediately worried about her health. As Victor took the call and listened to his mother, I watched his reaction, and his expression gradually became stern. What? You decided that on your own? Victor continued the conversation with his mother in an unusually sharp tone. Wait a minute. It seemed like the conversation was one-sided, and then she apparently hung up the phone. What happened? According to Victor, renovation work due to a real estate mistake was scheduled at his mother's apartment. Although another residence was offered, his mother refused it and decided to come to our place instead. Victor has an older brother by 5 years who has 3 children and is busy with daily life. His mother had first contacted his brother, but he had declined, saying, I have my hands full with the kids, so it's difficult for Mom to come here. So she decided, then I'll go to Victor's place, and called. What? Does that mean she's coming to our place? That's right. Starting tomorrow. Victor looked troubled. Living with my mother-in-law was unexpected, and I felt internally disordered and full of anxiety about what to do. For now, I'll look for a place for Mom to live in. I'd appreciate it if you could bear with it for a while. Understood. If there's anything she dislikes, let me know in advance. Thus, we started preparing for this unexpected event of living with my mother-in-law, such as clearing space for her. The next day, I happened to have a day off, so I decided to welcome her. At 8 a.m., the doorbell suddenly rang. Ha, this early? When I looked at the monitor, there was Victor's mother, Susan, standing there. Good morning. Good morning. You don't come out even though I've been ringing the bell, do you? My mother-in-law said that and entered the house without any hesitation. I felt uneasy about what was to come. My premonition turned out to be right. She lived completely on her own terms, without adjusting to our lifestyle as a couple. I was trying to be positive about it, but honestly, it was quite selfish. She would start eating as soon as dinner was prepared and take a bath immediately after finishing her meal. Of course, the dishes she used were always left on the table. In our home, we shared household chores, but it was clear from the first day that she had no intention of helping. The next day, when I mentioned that dinner might be late because I have work, my mother-in-law visibly showed her displeasure. I want to eat dinner at 7 p.m. What kind of daughter-in-law doesn't prepare meals at a set time? Despite being busy with work, I was internally irritated by such comments. It was really unreasonable considering I had already explained that my work schedule might cause irregular meal times. I will prepare so you can have dinner at 7 p.m. Oh, okay. After her brief reply, my mother-in-law went back to her room. I prepared to make sure she could have her meal exactly at 7 p.m., readying a simple set of 1 soup and 3 dishes. It was a lot of work, but I thought it was much better than constantly being nagged. This should be fine. After preparing the meal for my mother-in-law before my night shift, I headed to work feeling relieved. However, that feeling was completely overturned when I returned home from the night shift. Exhausted, I entered the living room and found my mother-in-law sitting in a chair. Good morning, mother. What a leisurely good morning. What was that dinner? Serving food that isn't freshly made? What kind of thoughtless daughter-in-law are you? For every complaint I made, she returned twice as many. Unsure how to respond and feeling incapable of dealing with it anymore, tears spontaneously flowed. I eventually decided to tell Victor everything. Sorry, Victor. I don't know how to deal with your mother anymore. I sent Victor an email explaining the situation and then covered my head with a blanket. I wanted to put some distance between myself and my mother-in-law. I'll listen to everything about today, so I'll come home right after work ends. Receiving a message from Victor, I finally managed to get some sleep. As planned, Victor came home right after work. Shall we go out for dinner tonight? He suggested that, and told my mother-in-law to eat something on her own before taking me out. My mother-in-law was complaining as usual, but I didn't mind because Victor pulled my hand. When Victor heard about the situation with his mother, his face hardened with anger. I can't forgive her for trampling on your kindness just because she's my parent. Don't worry, I'll talk to her directly when we get back. As Victor said this and stroked my back, his words warmed my heart. A smile naturally came to my face. Thank you. I'm really sorry, Kate. I hate to see you so troubled. I'll make sure you can always keep smiling. When we returned home, my mother-in-law still looked unsatisfied as she looked at me. Why do you feed me whatever and go out to eat yourselves? Take me with you next time. With Victor by my side, her words didn't carry the usual force. Mom, isn't the way you speak to Kate far too harsh? If you're going to speak like that, you might as well leave. Victor said out loud what I'd been thinking, and I was very grateful to him. However, my mother-in-law just calmly drank her coffee and affected. I was just astonished, and Victor continued to speak. Are you listening? Do you have anything to say? This is my son's house, which makes it my house. A daughter-in-law is an outsider, so of course, she should listen to what I say. While placing her teacup on the table with a confident look, I felt frightened. What? This is mine and Kate's house. The outsider here is you, Mom. What are you talking about? This house is in Victor's name, isn't it? It's impossible for a mother to be an outsider. I had been patient for a long time, but I thought it was better to make things clear, so I began to speak. Actually, the house is in my name. My mother-in-law's face stiffened for a moment. Then she suddenly started laughing. Haha, what are you talking about all of a sudden? You don't need to act so deaf. No, I'm being normal. This house is in my name. I continued to calmly convey the truth, holding back my emotions. Stop joking around. There's still time to apologize. I'm not lying. This house is in Kate's name. Victor's calm response suddenly changed my mother-in-law's expression, and her face quickly turned red. Why? How can you say that so calmly? I can't believe you're living in a house under your wife's name. Kate's mother previously owned some real estate and decided to pass it on to Kate. That's why the rent from the tenants here contributes to our income. This was Kate's suggestion. Victor explained the situation to his mother. My mother had been working hard, buying real estate for the future, and saving the rental income for her retirement. When the assets reached a certain level, my mother told me she would transfer them to me, which coincidentally happened around the time I decided to marry. So, I proposed to Victor that we use one of the rooms for ourselves and rent out the rest. Although initially hesitant about the house being in the wife's name rather than the husband's, Victor was pleased with the suggestion and praised me. That's a wonderful idea. How did you come up with that? Saving up for trips and meals together was fun. This is something we decided together, so I don't want you to interfere. If you can't accept that, I want you to leave. I can't believe it. With those words left hanging, my mother-in-law quietly returned to her room. The next day, she continued to stay in her room, and when I returned from work, only the remnants of the meal I had prepared were left on the living room table. Even when Victor came home, there was no change in my mother-in-law's situation. "How's my mom doing? She's been in her room the whole time." Hearing that, Victor went to my mother-in-law's room and knocked on the door. "Mom, we need to talk." It was as if she had been waiting for someone to call her, and she immediately opened the door. She might have wanted someone to care. Victor pulled out a key from his pocket and handed it to her. "What is this?" "I contacted the real estate agent you turned down before and arranged for a replacement apartment. It's fully furnished and ready to live in right away." "I see. Then I'll enjoy living on my own." Leaving those words behind, she quickly packed her things and left. She might have been packing all day. Given how quickly the door opened, she might have been waiting to be asked to stay. Watching her leave, various thoughts crossed my mind, but only I knew my true feelings. "I want to continue living with you just like before. I've caused a lot of trouble. Thank you." "Huh? Thank you for protecting me and caring about me. I look forward to continuing this journey with you." As Victor was about to apologize again, I intentionally interrupted him. There was no need for Victor to apologize. "Likewise, I look forward to more time together." Saying this, Victor smiled happily and hugged me. "We have our own lives. We have our own rules. No matter what others say, if we are okay with it, that's all that matters." "Hey, shall we go on a trip on our next day off?" "That sounds great. Let's plan where to go." Just imagining a future with this person makes me feel like I can overcome the daily work and challenges. I vowed to myself to do my best tomorrow, too. Now the house is mine. If you have any complaints, let's get a divorce. I felt giddy as Ben happily told me he had changed the house to his name shortly after my father's death. There's no way such a change of ownership could be that easy. I thought Ben might be misunderstanding something. If that's the case, I don't mind getting a divorce, but won't you regret it? Not expecting me to agree to a divorce, Ben exclaimed in surprise. "What? There's no way I would regret it." Ben replied with full confidence. Will he truly not regret it? If so, I won't hold back either. If he regrets it later, it's not my concern. I laughed inwardly at Ben's naive thinking. I am Kathy Anderson, a 35-year-old public servant with a hard-working personality. I believe that my current profession as a public servant suits me the most. When I passed the civil service exam, my parents were very happy. It was because I was always told by my father to aim for a stable job as much as possible. If I was asked whether civil service jobs are stable, I'd have to say there's no certainty in modern society. However, at present, there are no major troubles, and I expect to continue working as a public servant. There's a reason why my father recommended a stable job. After graduating from university, he chose to work at a startup. Filled with enthusiasm for his new career, he aimed to improve his skills and jumped into a company with only 10 employees. However, sustaining a business for years is a significant challenge. The company my father joined unfortunately went bankrupt after 2 years. While struggling to find a suitable reemployment, my father decided to start his own business. Lacking experience, he started in the food industry and gradually grew his business. As the number of stores increased, he hired many employees and kept an eye on daily sales and profits. Since most of the stores were operated in renovated vacant houses or owned properties, there was no worry about rent. As a result, as the number of customers increased, the revenue grew, and he built a considerable fortune over 35 years. However, he also experienced many hardships during that process. The instability of a life as an entrepreneur accumulated daily stress. As profits began to rise, people motivated by money gathered, leading to difficulties in human relationships. Sometimes, employees would even take off with the store's funds. Building wealth was not easy. Therefore, I think my father wanted me to avoid the hardships he experienced and wished for a comfortable life for me. I am satisfied with my job as a public servant, a job that suits my nature. While not affluent, I can maintain a normal life without any issues. Hence, I believe stable days like these are the best. I'll be home late tomorrow, so I don't need dinner. That was my husband, Ben, informing me. This wasn't the first time he had said this. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, I asked while wiping my hands, "Working overtime again? Is the factory that busy?" "It's a busy period right now." Ben works in a semiconductor manufacturing plant on the assembly line. Having worked in this job for 18 years since graduating high school can be extremely challenging, considering you process parts every day for 8 hours straight. It's nothing for me, but for Ben it seems to be easier than using his brain. I can understand since semiconductors have been scarce recently. Must be tough. Yes, so I might be a bit late. Understood. Take care. Lately, it's become common for him to come home late, sometimes not returning until after midnight in the worst case. I can hardly believe he's working this late, so he's probably having a drink somewhere after work. I understand the urge to unwind with alcohol, but I feel the frequency has increased too much. However, it's difficult to say that to Ben. Telling him not to drink when he's exhausted from his daily demanding job might provoke a backlash. Fortunately, his drinking expenses are covered by his own allowance, so it's not a big issue. As I watch Ben head to the bedroom, I roll my shoulders extensively. Lately, my shoulder pain has worsened. Life with Ben is full of mismatches, and it seems like the mental stress is starting to manifest itself physically. I try to tell myself not to overthink. I met Ben during my second year of high school. He was attending a nearby boys' high school and approached me during a cultural festival. Initially hesitant when the younger Ben asked for my contact information, I eventually gave in to his persistent approach. When I asked why he was so interested in someone as plain as me, he shyly admitted that he liked my appearance. On the other hand, I had a rather frivolous impression of Ben at first, so I was quite worried. However, contrary to my expectations, his sincere personality became evident, and I gradually found myself drawn to him. Even after Ben started working post-high school and I became a civil servant following university, he has always been my partner. We got married at 27 but haven't been blessed with children. It may not be possible anymore, but I feel our life together is not bad. As long as I can spend the future with the present Ben, that's enough. He probably feels the same. In the midst of these peaceful yet busy days, an unexpected call came to my phone. "Hello? Kathy. Oh, good. You're there. Are you at work?" "Yes, what's up?" A call from my mother during a weekday in the afternoon was unusual, signaling something must have happened. I asked her why she called. "We have a problem. Your father suddenly collapsed. And today, we got the results from the tests. He's been diagnosed with colon cancer." "Dad has cancer?" I can't believe it. The word cancer from my mother left me shocked. We've never had cancer in our family before. But it's true that my father, being a business owner, had neglected his health checkups. So, it's not surprising that the disease was discovered late. I'm telling the truth. And it seems to be quite advanced. That's terrible. But aren't there advanced treatments for cancer these days? Unfortunately, in his case, they said he only has a few months left. A few months? That's unbelievable. It was an unbearable reality. At 60, my father's rapid cancer progression made sense. Due to the late discovery, the cancer was terminal, and despite medical advancements, treatment would be challenging. My mother explained through tears. "I understand. I'll return home for a bit. I'll talk to Ben too." "That would be helpful, Kathy. My father is an important figure to me. I couldn't just stand by when he's in trouble." Ben would understand. Distracted, I finished my work and headed home. Ben, who had returned home unusually early, noticed my somber demeanor and asked, "What's wrong? You seem down." Ben was enjoying a beer in the living room. I shared everything about my mother's call with Ben and discussed returning to my parents' home for a while. "That's worrisome." "Understood. Support your father while you're there." "Thank you. Sorry for not being able to prepare meals while I'm away." "No problem. I've been getting home late from work lately. I'll just eat out in the meantime. But you should have a proper meal once in a while." "Don't worry, I'll be careful." Ben listened calmly. Feeling reassured, I started packing for my trip home the next day. As bedtime approached and I was about to head to my room, I heard Ben's voice on the phone from his room. He must be talking to someone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but I stopped in my tracks when I caught a snippet of his conversation. "It seems he will pass away soon. Can you do something about the matter we discussed earlier?" "Pass away? Was he talking about my father?" "Yes, that's right. I understand. Please take care of it once he's gone." It wasn't clear who he was talking to or what the arrangement was, but it was evident that the conversation was about my father's situation. Why use such a term as gone? Ben had never spoken disrespectfully about my father, even if their relationship wasn't especially close. Ben wasn't the type to be indifferent in such a critical situation. Yet, why does it seem like Ben doesn't care about my father? Even though my father is terminally ill, he is still alive, and discussing matters after he is gone with someone else is inappropriate. At that moment, my trust in Ben wavered. Since then, I couldn't shake off my suspicions about Ben. "Take care," Ben said cheerfully as he saw me off, but I couldn't stop thinking about his phone conversation on my way home. It seemed like he was plotting something. If it's related to my father, it must be about money. I never told Ben about the extent of my father's wealth. I felt discussing finances might lead to problems, so I decided we could discuss inheritance when the time came. At this stage, I didn't see the necessity to talk about it. I wasn't hiding it. I just thought it was premature. But what if Ben knew about my father's wealth and was targeting it? I shouldn't think about it too much. While trying to dispel these negative thoughts, I spent time supporting my father and enjoying pleasant conversations. "I'm grateful, Kathy, Mom. I'm a lucky man." "You don't have to be so formal. It's too early to be thankful." We tried to maintain a cheerful atmosphere while looking at my father's calm smile. The last moments with my father ended 3 months later. Neither my mother nor I were fully prepared for the premature goodbye. During the funeral, I was in a daze, struggling to accept the reality that my father was no longer in this world. On the other hand, Ben was oddly cheerful, which felt unsettling to me. It wasn't until a week after the funeral, as I was drinking alone in the living room, that Ben approached and said, "The hassle is finally over." Crossing his arms and clasping his hands behind his head, he spoke with a cold gaze. "Hassle? Yes, exactly. I was hoping your father would kick the bucket a bit sooner. But even after that, there were still procedures like the funeral to deal with, so it was a pain in the butt." "How can you say that? Someone has died, my father at that. How can you talk like that?" I couldn't help but retort to Ben's astonishing statement. It became clear that Ben had actually wished for my father's early death. I remembered the phone conversation about my father. What were Ben's true intentions? "When can we receive the inheritance? Your family is quite wealthy, right? I know there's a substantial fortune to be had." At that moment, I understood what Ben had been aiming for. I never imagined Ben would have his eyes on my family's wealth. I had never discussed my family's financial situation with Ben. However, it seems Ben knew that my father had substantial assets. "You look like you're wondering how I knew." I can understand. My family was always poor. Securing daily meals was a struggle. On the other hand, I heard your family was wealthy and your parents often went on trips. Just that fact alone made it clear your family was affluent. That's why I made some inquiries beforehand. "Inquiries? With whom?" Ben used the word inquiries after guessing my family's financial situation. The day Ben was on the phone in the bedroom flashed through my mind, and I wondered if that was the inquiry he mentioned. I asked a real estate lawyer acquaintance about the old man's inheritance. I'm going to make sure to receive the inheritance properly. What? I was shocked that he had discussed the inheritance with someone else without my consent, and doing so while my father was still alive. At that moment, I began to doubt whether the person in front of me was truly my husband. You'll get a response soon. Just wait. With that, Ben returned to the bedroom. He was probably going to contact that lawyer again. I was just astonished by his unbelievable actions. Why would he investigate my family's inheritance on his own? Is there any other spouse who would do such a thing? Inheritance is a matter our family should discuss, not for Ben to get involved in. My trust in his actions wavered, and I started avoiding conversations with him. We spent some time without speaking, but the situation changed drastically a month later. Putting aside Ben's previous comments on inheritance, the estate was formally transferred to my mother and me. I inherited my father's mansion worth $2 million and felt the weight of this asset. I had no intention of moving into the mansion right away, and it seemed a waste to just leave it unused. While I was contemplating whether to turn it into a vacation home or sell it, Ben suddenly spoke to me after not having exchanged words for days. "Hey, Kathy, how are you doing?" How ironic, considering we lived under the same roof. Ignoring his words, I reached for a book nearby, but he continued, "Listen, I've changed the ownership of the mansion you inherited to my name." I stopped reading and stared at him in astonishment. "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, I asked that real estate lawyer to proceed with the title transfer." "You did a title transfer, really?" "Yes, really." I was speechless. Not only did he do it behind my back, I also had a problem with the lawyer involved. Now the house is mine. If you have a problem with that, we can get a divorce. And I'll be giving the house to my family. My brother has been wanting a larger house, so I want to make him happy. Just after my father's death, Ben was happily talking about changing the house to his name, and I felt dizzy. It seemed unlikely that a title transfer could be done so easily. And for his family to move in? I thought Ben might be misunderstanding something but was at a loss for words. His actions infuriated me, and I couldn't let this go. It would be better to plan and retaliate rather than confront him with words. If that's the case, I don't mind getting a divorce, but won't you regret it? Ben seemed surprised that I would accept a divorce so readily. Regret? There's no way I would. Ben replied with full confidence. Will he truly not regret it? If so, I won't hold back either. If he regrets it later, that's his problem. I smirked inwardly at Ben's naivety. I decided to use every means possible to gather information about Ben's personal life. I decided to take a vacation and inspect Ben's room while he was at work. Ben's room was a mess, with various items scattered all over the floor. There, I found something and quietly slipped it into my pocket. Next, I reached for the computer on Ben's desk and launched the messaging app. I see, this person is the real estate lawyer dealing with legal issues. The messages exchanged with James Owen were appalling. They were mostly about money. The discussions were about how to illicitly acquire funds. I sighed in surprise. It seemed pitiful that Ben was following such a person's instructions. After leaving the room, I headed to a certain location. After repeating tiring tasks, I went to confirm Ben's greed. The deeper I investigated, the more I realized what kind of person I've actually been living with. That sent a chill down my spine. After concluding the investigation about Ben and feeling completely detached, I decided to file for divorce. My marriage with Ben ended legally once the divorce papers got granted at the municipal office. It was an unexpected separation, but I no longer had any affection towards Ben, who disdained my father. The Ben I knew was nowhere to be found. The investigation revealed Ben to be an unbelievable person. After submitting the divorce papers, the house was no longer mine. In fact, the house was purchased in Ben's name from the beginning, with a mortgage taken out. I considered moving out, but Ben did not return to the house afterward. He's probably living in the mansion I inherited. He might be living comfortably now, but how long will that happiness last? I calmly thought about Ben's future. 3 days later, Ben finally appeared before me. "Kathy, has the divorce already been granted?" he asked anxiously as he entered through the front door. He came back suddenly and asked an impertinent question, to which I responded, "What? So, we're divorced, right?" Ben exclaimed loudly. He seemed to be in extreme distress. "Yes, it was granted 3 days ago. So, we are now strangers to each other." "What? What does that mean?" Disappointment gradually appeared on Ben's face. Despite his own desire for divorce, I wished he wouldn't adopt a blaming attitude. "Why would you make such a unilateral decision? Divorce? Really? Unilateral? You're the one who wanted a divorce, remember? What are you talking about now?" Ben fell silent at my logical response. His sudden issue with the divorce was clear to me. "Kathy, please, let's start over. Otherwise, I'll." Ben knelt down, looking dejected. While feeling sorry for him, I asked, "Did something happen?" I had a rough idea of what was going on, but decided to delve deeper. "Just now, debt collectors came looking for me. I tried contacting James Owen, but he seems to have changed his phone number and I can't get through. I sent an email but got no response. It looks like I've been deceived by him." James Owen was that self-proclaimed real estate lawyer. While Ben's explanation was fragmented, I grasped the gist of the situation. It became clear what Ben had been involved in when I searched through his room. "It seems you were obsessed with gambling. There were gambling receipts scattered all over your room. I also investigated your visits to the local casino. You've been going there for almost a year, right? Is that why you ran out of funds?" Checking our joint bank account, I noticed gradual withdrawals that I couldn't recall, and it turned out you were also taking money from our savings. "Is that why you were duped by that real estate lawyer?" "Exactly. Ben had been secretly spending his days gambling without my knowledge. The reason for his late returns was not due to drinking parties but because of gambling. When the inheritance from my father came up, it must have seemed like an opportunity for him. He had consulted with the so-called real estate lawyer Owen on how to get his hands on the inheritance." "Yes, that's right. I know gambling is wrong, but I was deceived by that person. The grand mansion that Kathy inherited didn't become mine. I'll go bankrupt at this rate. That would be sad, right? That's why I'm asking for help." How ironic of him to propose divorce only to beg for reconciliation later. I felt contempt rather than anger for the pitiful behavior of my former partner. Has he forgotten that he secretly wished for my father's death and insulted him? I couldn't even consider that man as my ex-husband. "What? What are you talking about? You're the problem, aren't you?" "Sympathy. I have no such feelings for you. After all, getting deceived was also due to your carelessness. The real estate inherited from my father is in my name and not subject to division. Changing its ownership without consent is impossible. Yet, you were naive enough to get deceived by James Owen and now you come asking for help? I will never forgive you, not in a lifetime." Seeing my face filled with anger, Ben got scared. I opened the front door, leaving him aside. "If you don't mind, I will move to the luxurious house I inherited from my father. As for you, try to manage your life in this house. Oh, and don't forget about the loan repayment. Good luck." Wait. Despite his call from behind, I coldly left him behind and walked away with dignity. 7 days later, I was surprised by an unexpected call. Seeing the name displayed on the screen, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Ben's mother. I answered the phone, anxious that she might criticize me for the divorce. However, the words I heard were completely unexpected and surprising. "Kathy, I'm truly sorry. My son seems to have committed something unforgivable towards you. I'm honestly at a loss for words on how to apologize." Her voice was filled with deep regret and apology. I responded with some confusion. "No, there's no need for an apology. Please don't worry about it." But she didn't accept my words. "No, I can't just leave things as they are. I heard my son is trying to have you shoulder his debt repayments, and I'm both shocked and profoundly disappointed. We plan to give him strict guidance at home from now on. I've warned him to be prepared for a tough time. We won't let him gamble ever again and we'll teach him the importance of money management. For a while, he'll have to take on all responsibilities for work and home life on his own, she expressed her firm resolve. Ben's mother felt strong anger towards her son's inappropriate actions, and he was about to face some harsh days, she passionately explained. I secretly hoped to see how Ben would confront this, feeling this was a just retribution for him, who scorned my father and tried to swindle away the property I cherished. I had no ounce of sympathy for him. I genuinely hoped he would dedicate himself to repaying his debts. And as planned, I moved to the magnificent mansion I inherited from my father. This new home, furnished and requiring no additional purchases, filled me with a profound sense of satisfaction for the new life ahead. Although I left behind clothes and other small items at the old house, the excitement for the liberating life ahead made me unstoppable. The new residence was spacious, an extravagance for one person. Currently, I'm not keen on remarrying. However, if fate smiles at me and I meet a soulmate again, I'll invite that special person to this expansive living space. Imagining the expression on the future spouse's face as they enter this house brought a smile to mine. This hopeful anticipation is a significant light of hope for me now. And I sincerely say, thank you, Dad. This valuable house, his last gift, is more than a physical space. It's the foundation for starting a new life, a place that connects me to the past and steps into the future.